Buddy. So, it does not happen too many times that you watch a science fiction movie. eh, and the movie talks about year 2054. And when a movie talks about some events that are going to take place in 2054, what do you expect? You expect that those kind of things will happen, possibly in 2100 and things like that. But in this particular case, what Minority Report was talking about may happen much sooner than that. It may happen in next few years. And that's the most exciting part about this thing. So what I will talk about today, hey, what's going on here? This is not working. Okay. Okay, I will have to use this here. So what I'm going to talk about today is how you as an individual is the most important thing. It's not the society, it's not anything else. You as a person is the most important thing. And that is the message that I want to convey to you in different forms. Okay? This is a famous quote. I do not know where I read it, but it stuck with me for a long time. That I really don't care for money. It's exactly like you can imagine Turas talking about, that he doesn't give a damn about money. All that he cares is what wearables he can buy from using that money, or what kind of food he can buy. And that's what it is. But here we have been talking all about wearables all through the day, yesterday, and today again we will keep on talking about this. So the important thing that it starts happening is that what is it that wearables can do? And that's what we want to talk about, that really, do we care for wearables? Do we want to worry about those? The answer is really no. None of us really cares about wearables. We don't want to have one extra thing to be used or several extra things to be used. But if they can do something really, really exciting for you, you are going to do that. Okay? And with that, let me bring to you something very important. In the last century, a very big disruption took place in healthcare. Very, very major disruption. And that is the disruption. Because of that, we talk about healthcare very differently. So yesterday's discussion and today's discussions are really motivated by that kind of thing. And in fact, because of that disruption, you start thinking about healthcare very differently. Today, when you think about healthcare, you think, if I am feeling sick, if I have some problem, I got to go to a doctor, or I got to go to a hospital. Ask yourself, is that the right thing to happen? Think about the days, very primitive days, when you needed food. We are going to talk a lot about food today, so let's talk about food. In the earliest days when you needed food, what did you do? You became hunter-gatherer. You went to the place where food was there. Okay? But does that philosophy exist today? You don't go to the food. What happens? Food comes to you. Okay? If that's what is happening in case of food, similarly, earlier, when just few years ago, when you wanted to communicate, you went to a phone. Okay? What happens with these devices? Wherever you are, the phone is going to come to you. You don't go to the things. Okay? So if you think about this, the way everything has been changing, and if that is the case, why not the same thing happening to the healthcare? Why shouldn't something that is needed, that is so important to you, should come to you? And that is a major disruption that you want to bring in the society. that can healthcare come to me when I need that? And when you start thinking about this, I'm going to put together to you the summary of what my talk is going to be today. And that is Healthcare 2020. Either you can interpret that's going to happen in 2020, or you can consider this to be a vision. In this, you are going to have lots of data, lots of signals that are coming from wearable devices. You will convert these signals to some kind of streams that we are going to talk about today. Apply those things to event mining and machine learning algorithms, and we are going to build something that will look more like an individual model. This model that rightly or wrongly we started calling objective self will create these models for you. We'll talk in more details about this. And because of those models, it may be that I'm jogging in Lausanne at some place, and suddenly an ambulance will stop next to me because the system determined that I'm going to get a heart attack. I don't have to call anybody. I don't have to complain to anything. My system will determine, and that's what will happen. Now, if we want to do this, what kind of things are required and how that is going to happen? And this is the important revolution that's really taking place in health. And this revolution really started in the last century. In the last century, in the middle of the century, people found something very exciting. And that is depicted in this particular chart. When you look at this is all about life expectancy. And what you notice is very interesting, that life expectancy increased from here, which was between 40 to 50, to now almost to 80 years. The question is, why did this happen? What was the biggest factor in this happening? And if you look at this chart, you find out that almost at the middle of the century, something very interesting happened. We as human beings learned how to deal with infectious diseases. Earlier, most people died because of infectious diseases, plague, cholera, you name it. And then by that time, we started controlling those. And then we started thinking very differently about health. And that is a very important factor. On the lighter side, and I think I'm not in danger. On the lighter side, why do you think there is so much difference between male and female life expectancy? Why do you think that female live longer than male?
Because of marriage?
The only reason is that they don't have to live with the wife. As I mentioned to you, this is on the lighter side. Okay. This is an important thing. Lots of people, after analyzing different things, it started identifying and saying, and there are multiple articles that will put that real life expectancy based on biological factors is somewhere between 115 to 125. You can find an article that will support 115, so you can find article to 122 and so on. But the important thing that happens from this is you start thinking, how long do you want to live? So Turaj, how long do you want to live?
You know the answer.
I know the answer. Turaj's answer is given here. He wants to be immortal. I'm trying to convince him that recycling is better. We all should come, we all should have good time, and we should live. And because of that, what we can start thinking is the realizable dream, that can we live 100 plus years? But this should be good living. How can we live nicely? And that's what we want to do. This is what we want to discuss. And if we want to discuss this, the first thing that you have to realize is this, that ultimately our life is sum of the two important things, personal genome and personal lifestyle. Yeah. Now, we can do very little to change our genome, yeah, but we can do a lot to change our lifestyle. Yeah. And that's where you start thinking that if I change my lifestyle, what kind of things can really happen? And this is a very nice way to describe this, that if your lifestyle results into this kind of things, then the results could be the following thing. So your lifestyle is starting to describe to you what kind of things are going on. And as a result of that, what could be happening to you. And as we all know, after we wiped out infectious diseases, the reasons we die normally are because of all those things there. And can we control those? So you start asking yourself a question, how do I deal with some of these things? And that's where you start thinking about what some people, and one of the person has become my hero. His name is Eric Topol. I will talk about him in a minute. But he and several other people started arguing that what we really need is medical emancipation. What does that really mean? What does medical emancipation mean? We live in a society where, rightly or wrongly, lots and lots of things are controlled by medical associations. Particularly if you live in a country like United States, the things are even worse than any other country. There, we have been convinced that the person who knows best about me is not me. Who is it? Any doctor. Any doctor that I go to for the first time will know much better about me than I do. That's what we have been told, that doctors will decide about you what you can do. And that is the situation there, that today when you look at this, doctors know the best about you. And really, do you believe that? Most cases, you know that the person who knows the best about you are you. You know exactly how you are feeling. You know exactly what kind of things you do. You know exactly how you have been living. So all the information that is happening is about you, and that's why you know the best. And Eric Topol, who himself is a cardiologist, has been a very successful person. He was at one time the chief cardiologist who was deciding all the policies in medical field in the United States. He wrote 3 years ago this book, The Creative Destruction of Medicine, where he argues that everything that we practice in medical field is wrong. It has to change completely. And the argument that he made, the previous diagram that I showed, was from his book, not directly from his book, but the idea was from his book. The idea is that until recently, we did not know about our personal genome, and there was no way to determine our lifestyle. When I go to a doctor, this is a very personal thing. Many times, my wife will go with me to doctor. And so I'm sitting down with the doctor will start asking me, so how much exercise do you do? And I will tell the doctor that I must be doing half an hour a day for about 5 days a week. As soon as I finish my sentence, my wife, like every other good wife, immediately tells that he's lying. He does hardly 5 minutes, maybe 3 times a week. Now, what does the doctor have to do? Or let me ask you other question. Doctor will ask me, how much wine do you drink? How much meat do you eat? How much you do all these things? Do I answer to doctor honestly? No? But the more important question is, do I even know the answer honestly? Yeah. Because when you go to a doctor, when they start asking the questions, most of the questions that they ask you, you don't know the answer. You just make up the answers. And that time you start thinking, what is the right answer that doctor wants to listen to? And then you tell that answer. Yeah? So Eric Topol's argument was that until recently, we never knew about personal genome, and we never knew our lifestyle. But now, the world has changed. As you have been hearing all day yesterday, we live in the days of this, and we live in the days of this, and a lot more other wearables. And if we do that, this device knows a lot more than I do. If I want to find out where did I had dinner yesterday, I don't know this, but my device will tell me. Yeah? And that's what is starting to happen. So he wrote that book 3 years ago that we need a creative destruction of medicine, a new way to do medicine to start. And just this year, early this year, he wrote this book, The Patient Will See You Now, where he argued that you should not be going to doctor. When needed, doctor should attend you. That's what happens in almost every other field. If I want to go somewhere, I call a taxi or I call Uber. Yeah? I do not do anything else. Whenever I need something, that something should attend. And that something should be customized to my needs. And that's what we need to do. The other important thing that he argued in his book, and now it has become a very popular thing, when you look at a doctor, you always associate a doctor with a stethoscope. Yeah? Can you imagine that a stethoscope is the only device that has not changed in last 150 years? Yeah? For last 150 years, it has remained the same. On the other hand, you can start considering now that your wearable devices and your smartphone combined are really personalized all the time, recording a stethoscope. They are recording all the medical parameters, everything that you want to do all the time. And this information can be used. So when you go from here to 100 plus years of happiness, you start thinking that the 3 factors that are determined by happiness are health, wealth, and happiness. And these factors really come from my lifestyle. Okay? And my lifestyle is determined by these factors. Okay? These are different factors that should be collected if you want to find out exactly what my lifestyle is. Theoretically, you are going in the direction that you can start collecting all these. Practically, what we will do today is to start considering that let's forget about the 8 factors. Let's focus only on the big 3 factors. Yeah. These big 3 factors, what will determine those big 3 factors? I am a system. Remember I said that I want to build a model of me. Yeah. So I am a system. How do you talk about a system? You talk about a system as what is the input to the system, what is the output of the system, and under what condition the system is working, where the system is being used. So environment. So when we start talking about 3 factors about the lifestyle, these are the 3 factors. Number 1 has become physical activity. What is the output of the system? And what you heard yesterday and what you will hear today through all the wearables is how can you measure output? Now, why is output more important than input? There's no other reason but the fact that it's easier to do. And we normally in science, we like to do first things that are easy to do. So that was the easy thing. What is the second thing is, what is the input? Okay? And that's what you are going to hear in a few talks today. And that's going to be an important topic. And the final thing we want to discuss is what are the environmental factors. Okay? And this is what is going to start determining what kind of things we do. Okay? So these are the three, what that I call big three of our health. And let's consider these big three things. Okay? So when you start considering this, one thing that you realize is that from being, and in fact this is a very important point. Somebody started talking about big data yesterday and all these things. The most important thing that has happened in the last 10 years is we used to be data poor, now we are data rich. Yeah. But as it happens in many cases, that when you are poor and suddenly you become rich, you have the resources, but your thinking is still very poor. You still think like a very poor person. Yeah. And that causes serious problems. When you are rich, the best way to do is to think like a rich person. Yeah? And that's what is happening here, that until very recently, data was very expensive and small. You remember I mentioned to you going to doctor? That was exactly what was happening that time, that we did not have any data. The medical models, all the disease models are so flawed. Yeah? Doctors don't know why a particular disease takes place. They don't have the correct demographic. They don't have the idea of why somebody gets this particular kind of cancers, or why does somebody's lifestyle result in this kind of diseases. Okay? And the reason is not that doctors are stupid. The reason is very simple. How many of you in this room believe in astrology? Nobody. But astrology has been with us for all the time. It appears in newspapers all the time and all this kind of thing. Why is this? I would argue that astrology was a science that started a long time ago because people wanted to predict future. All the sciences and engineering are for predicting future. Yeah? But astrology is bogus, not because people's intentions were bad or people who started looking at that were any stupid or anything like that. The reason was you didn't have data. There was no ability to collect data. And even if you had data, there was no ability to analyze it. And the same thing is happening here. So we have all these disease models and everything. How can we change those models considering this? One of the things that is very commonly being talked in medical sciences nowadays is what they call n equal to 1 phenomena. The first thing that at one time when you wanted to create any experiments in medicine was how many people participated, how many subjects provided you the data. Okay? But in most cases nowadays, when you are analyzing a person, trying to understand the person, you want to collect data only about the person. Yeah. So there are two cases very clearly. One is the traditional way of collecting data and analyzing it, but the other is how do you collect data about one particular individual and analyze it. Okay? So when you start considering this, you start considering that really we are going through a major disruption today. Until very recently or until now, when I go to a doctor, the things have changed in last few years. In place of just handwritten notes, now they are scribbling on computer or on tablets, and they can give you access to that. But effectively, we are just a folder. But what should really happen, based on what you have been hearing yesterday and today, is that you are really your own data. When you want to look at your record, you should be looking at the record that's coming from all the variables and everything about you. So when you start doing this, then you start thinking, how are we going to do this? We have all these variables. We are going to collect all this data. What do we do with all this data? And that's what Emerson said long time ago. that shallow men believe in luck or in circumstances, strong men believe in cause and effect. Causality principle, trying to understand the model, is the most important thing. And that's what we do it. We all know that if you want to control something, the first step is to measure it. After you start measuring it, you build the models. And that's the part of understanding. Once you have the models, then you know how you are going to control it. And you keep on improving this. Given the three big factors, how do we do this? We start considering the activity things, we start considering the food thing, and we start considering the environment thing. But how do we really deal with this kind of thing? And what have we been doing in that particular direction? So in our group, we started thinking about this 5-6 years ago, and we started talking and analyzing that until very recently, even now in many cases, we create all the data anecdotally. You start collecting this. When you become a little bit more systematic, you go to diarized data. You start writing down and noting this because you say you can't rely on memory. The next started coming quantified self. With wearables, that became the big thing. But once you have all this data, what you can start doing with this? And that's what starts becoming very important thing, that how can we start taking all this data, all my activity data, all other measurements that I can perform, combine all these things, and can I start using all these things to build the model of a person? For example, yesterday when I was eating, I was all the time worried about one thing. But then I was not worried about other thing. My observation about myself, and that's why I have formed this model about myself, is that if I eat spicy food and drink more than 2 glasses of wine, I'm going to have sleepless night. Yeah. But good thing was that the food was not spicy yesterday. So I was not that much worried, but I was all the time thinking about that is this going to cause me problems? That's because, based on my past observations, I have just heuristically created this model. Can I be more systematic about this? And with this goal, we started looking at the problem in the following form, that we have different kinds of environmental sensors, we have different wearable sensors, and we have my calendar and all this information. Can I take all this information that is coming from different kinds of sensory sources, can I convert it to daily life activities? Yeah. And from this daily life activities, we start identifying different types of events that are happening in my daily life, create something called personical, which is kind of electronic chronicle about a person. So you can call it personal chronicle. Okay? And if I have a personal chronicle collected, then I can use all my event mining, data mining, pattern recognition, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, all those techniques, and build a model, which is cause-effect model of myself. And I can start using this in different kinds of things. What that means is that given any kind of situation, I start with these different types of data streams that are coming in from different sources. I use those data streams, use different sources, and I will not go into too much details of this. I will give you a flavor of the approach that we have adopted. We use those things and convert all these streams to basically event streams. Okay? And these event streams could be coming from, it could be related to individual data stream there, or they could be combining different data streams. But the goal becomes to get these event streams. Once I have these event streams, what do I start doing with this thing? First thing I do is I start representing computationally each event. And each event can be represented basically as with these 6 aspects of events, starting from time, location, what kind of information is coming about this kind of thing, what kind of data I am collecting for this kind of thing. What events could be causing this particular event, or what events could be caused by this particular event, and is this event part of some other event, and so on. So these become the different models. So each of these events can be represented this way. So you suppose that you have detected this event stream, so each event could be represented like this. So we start considering these daily life activities that we want to do. We used American Time Use Surveys taxonomy that they have used for this kind of different things. So what do you do for exercise? What do you do for different work-related things and all these things? And you designed this kind of systems there. So the first thing that you need to do is to start finding out these daily life activities. So what do? I ask you all have a mobile phone. So I say, anytime you do any activity, can you please note down what did you do? Each 5 minutes. And you are going to say, are you crazy? You want me to spend all my life recording what I am doing rather than doing what I am doing? So that doesn't make sense. But luckily, that's really not required. Because given this kind of data that's coming from wearable sensors, and you know all this, you go to the system called Moose or any of the systems, they are already doing part of this. That I can look at all this data, and by considering each 5-minute interval, I can decide and I can convert this data to important events. And these are the chronicle of my daily life activities. So I'm not computing these, or I'm not noting down these things. These things are automatically being done for me. And this is very easily can be done. And on the other hand, we are collecting all other kind of diverse signals. You saw some of the things, some of the medical signals. All those things are making enormous progress. Go to some quantified self meetings or start seeing what medical people are doing, different kinds of signals, and you are getting all kinds of signals. I don't have time, so I will not go through this. But this is the kind of things that start happening. And this is the framework that we are using and that we have built. That you have different types of events that are coming in. You can come up with this segmentation. So you will see in my next few slides, a lot of bands like this, the colorful bands. Each band represents one event. And you note down all the characteristics. But you require mathematical framework for doing this kind of thing. So we are developing the mathematical framework for this, that it starts talking about this. They are point events, they are interval events. We found out that interval events are not very good. You have to go to semi-interval events because cause and effect cannot be characterized very easily when you bound the events to particular things. So we started coming up with this. This is what it is showing. For example, this symbol means followed by, so there is, after meeting there is break, as you can see. After walking you arrive home, you see there. After exercise, and then there is time interval, after how much time you can get a small attack. And this kind of representation you do. This starts showing how you can start representing complex events, not only in one particular event stream, but in different event streams. So how can you start building these things? And from here, you can go and start doing, because you want to ultimately do the event mining. So you start defining sequential co-occurrences and concurrent co-occurrences. Sequential co-occurrences are after how much time after this particular event takes place, the other event will take place. Co-occurrences are when I'm doing this thing, what other things could be done. Interestingly enough, based on these two models, across either the same event stream or other event streams, you can start building very interesting situations. But before we go to that, this is what starts happening. when you are doing the sequential co-occurrence, you have to compute the co-occurrences with respect to time, like you do in correlational analysis. So in place of correlation, now you start talking about co-occurrences because you are not dealing at the signal level, you are dealing with the event level. So you have discretized it and you start dealing with that kind of thing. So this is just showing the visualization of this. You can start forming more sophisticated models, putting together event streams from different areas, and you can start completing all this. So we build all this mathematical framework to build ultimately this kind of thing. What is happening here is, how can I do interactive event mining? And that's what it is showing, that you have the data streams converted to event streams. This comes here, and then you do all the computations, and you can start creating this kind of thing. Either a user, either in the bottom-up manner or top-down manner, it starts coming up with the hypothesis. Okay? And based on that hypothesis, you decide what you want to study, what kind of co-occurrences you want to form, and what you want to study. And this is a system that Laleh Jalali, who just finished her PhD about 3 months ago, put together. Okay? And in this framework, what she did was, she gave you a complete ability to go either top-down or bottom-up. If you did not know what is happening in a particular case, you could go bottom-up, and you could find out which patterns are becoming dominant, and based on that you can form a hypothesis, and then based on that hypothesis you can test some other things. So you can start combining this. If you are interested in this, please send me a mail. I would be happy to send you her thesis and the software. So you can play with this. But this is the kind of things that started happening. What can this do? Some very interesting things. For example, this is the data that we obtained for different things, and this is the data about many different parameters. I don't have time to explain to you all these things in details here, but effectively based on all this data and doing the event analysis, you can do things that starts looking like this. This is analysis for asthma risk, because all over the world people are concerned about air quality and all the things related to asthma and allergy. So in this, conclusions like this were derived usually using this data, and when we discussed with experts, they really supported that most of these things that we found through this analysis make sense. For example, pollution increases suddenly followed by a high wind while temperature increases slightly will cause an asthma outbreak within 2 days. This was not at individual level, this was at the population level. So this is the data. Kyo, you will be interested in this. This is the data from Japan. Yeah. So because Japan has collected all this data, so you can get this data and you can get this kind of analysis. So you can start coming up with this kind of event-based analysis, and you can come with this. I will skip some of the results that we found this and jump to this kind of thing. How can you get individual insights related to this? The experiment that helped us in this particular aspect was that for an individual, you have a personical that is giving the person's activity thing, and you start considering the environmental factors. If you do this, you can find out this kind of thing, that exposure to polluted air is a risk factor for this particular person of asthma attack within how much time. And you can find out this. More important, as I started saying, I can find out easily about my sleepless nights. So you can come up with this kind of models. I was told to ignore that sign for some time, and Thuraj is the proof. He said that ignore the sign. So just for two minutes. Okay. So this is what is starting to happen, that you have this daily activities and you have different other factors. You can start doing this kind of cause-effect analysis, and you start coming up with these models to find out what's happening in this particular individual case. Okay? So last few minutes, I want to bring to you what John Boyd, who was a famous military strategist, talked about. He talked about something called OODA. If you are from military side, you know situation awareness is a very big thing. And this situation awareness idea was proposed that this is really a continuous cycle of observe, orient, decide, and act. Okay? In observe, you are collecting the signals. In orient, you are trying to decide what signals that you have collected are meaningful to you. And based on that, you make the decision, and then you implement the decision. This is a continuous loop. So you are seeing then what is the effect of this. Okay? So this is continuously going on. When you start thinking about this, this is what is really going on around you. That in this loop, there are these factors. That in observe and orient, you are saying you are aware of the situation. And orient is basically based on the baseline goals and action plans. Okay? This was popularized in military situation, and because of that, as you know, airplane cockpits and all the war rooms and all these things have all kind of dashboards. The whole idea about dashboard started from this kind of thing. But then there was a very important factor in that. The idea was, how can I use this kind of things for understanding situation and making decisions? Can we extend this to all kind of other applications? This philosophy can be used in the following way. You remember we talked about 3 factors. One of that, for example, for asthma, is very important. What is the air quality? What is the surrounding conditions? Because for each person, these conditions determine whether the person is going to get that attack or not. So let's consider 2 systems. One top system, which is collecting the data that's coming from all the sources and showing you what is the situation. We did this for United States. The second thing is you can develop a mobile phone application which collects data about the individual and starts doing the following things. That you are putting the information, and this information about the individual is also being fed there. So you know how many people are complaining about allergy, asthma, etc. But then you can also go and start collecting information about this particular person. And when you are collecting this information about the particular person, now you are completing this, and you can complete the complete loop by starting to put together this kind of system. That means now it is not only the individual situation, but what's happening all around, that information is used, and you can start making decisions there. Now, this is the situation awareness about you that you can start using. And that's what should be the goal of what we are talking about wearables. That when you talk about wearables, really what kind of things are you trying to do are the following things. Okay? This is what we are trying to do. We can use these wearables to build the personal models, and using these models, we can make people aware of the situation. We can inform the personal situation when needed to family, friends, doctors, or whoever is the right people. And this will help us make right decision at right moment, at right place. Thank you very much.